You have this unique, I always try to get into your head and try to kind of vicariously experience your experience. When you went there the first time, was it a huge shock factor? Or was it like, do you remember?
I think one of the issues is that Desis want to retain their culture and they want their kids to, they want to transmit that to their kids and they want their kids to keep a part of that still with them. And, you know, when you grow up biculturally, it's kind of sometimes confusing.
In your 27, 30 years of lifetime, have you ever experienced any sort of racism or discrimination because of your ethnicity, because of your color? If yes, to what degree?
A lot of parents want their kids to just follow a rigid set of commands, right? That does not create creativity. That does not create intelligence. That does not create any of the skills that you need to develop at an early age. If you let your kid do what your kid wants to do and have some minimal supervision, I think that's what most people, the consensus of psychologists and doctors and educators agree that that's the way to raise your kid.
It's a law based on how much of it is just being complicated, because these are complicated decisions you need to make. There is a fine line, there is a balance you have to make, how much you can control, how much the state should control, right? Like, these are difficult questions. So do you think there is is it all bad faith stuff going on? Or
my personal view, actually, if we're talking about the subject of drinking, is that I don't think the drinking age should be 21. I think it should be even higher. I think the drinking age should be 24.
you see, you are a person of color.
Yeah, but
and you are saying this,
the media,
you should be you should be on the receiving end, like, according to you should be on the receiving end. You should be someone who vociferously protests any notion against it, but you are you're talking. So that's the thing, like, these are the discussions people don't get to hear.
The children whose parents subsidize their expenses, oftentimes I see that they're more well behaved.
Wow. So now the question comes when a white folk does a crime kind of equal gravity, and he gets away. So the law is being applied. The law is being applied to the black folk. That makes sense. But the same law is not being applied to the white folk all the time. That gives you the notion of the law is that discrimination. Yourself, because you and I will be on the same page. So I'll give you that comfort, okay? I'll give you that comfort.
This is
Because let me. No, it's not. I mean, I don't think it has to be sensitive, because so the kids, they don't see color, okay? Kids don't see color. A white kid, a black kid will play with each other. If you look at those indices, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India is doing well in many indices. Pakistan is doing well in many indices. But overall, if you look at South Asia, it is surprising and maybe counterintuitive to many. But Bangladesh, in those social indices, Bangladesh is doing, probably in most indices, Bangladesh is doing better than Pakistan and India. But that doesn't absolve us of the shit we do all the time.
Doing better. Bangladesh is like one.
So this is something, bro. You and I mentioned that. I actually opened your eyes. I opened your eyes that Bangladesh is doing better than India, Pakistan.
You opened my eyes, because a lot has changed in a couple of years. People get an ego boost when they see America failing. People get an ego boost when they see racism in America. When they're like, oh, we feel a little bit better about ourselves. Maybe you shouldn't compare yourself to America.
You don't know him, right?
No.
You probably should follow this guy, because he is fair, he's balanced, he's disinterested. I was never sure if you are a right-leaning person or a left-leaning person.
I think that my views have evolved significantly, especially with the Trump's presidency.
Oh, that's a nice point. We'll get to that point. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. So what's your thought on Trump? Like, I don't know if it's a personal question or not. Yeah, I know you have a photo with Joe Biden in your profile photo, and you and we both went to Bernie Sanders' campaign, and you and I, we both to Trump's campaign. You and I, we both to, like, all the Democratic Party candidates when they came here. We went to their rally, but I was never certain whether you are supporting Trump over the Democratic candidates or not. Maybe it's a little bit personal questions. If you don't want to answer that question, we can of course skip. But what's your thought on Trump over the Democratic candidates? Let's say Biden.
I think that Donald Trump has a lot of mass appeal right now. The reason why I took a photo with Biden was because anyone who gets the opportunity to take a photo with the president will generally seize that opportunity. It was not that that was also my understanding. Yeah, I was parading my views with him, right? But my views towards Trump's are that, you know, kind of like what you think about him, right? From a moral standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, I don't see him as someone that really represents a good human. But I think from the standpoint of how he's able to appeal to the typical American, I think he does a very effective job at it. Yeah. I think he does a very effective job at it. And I think that really, Joe Biden, if you look at Joe Biden today versus Joe Biden just a year ago, you can see the decline.
Right.
And with Donald Trump, it's actually the opposite, right? He seems like every passing day he has more vigor, more stamina, and
Joe Biden has less approval rating than Trump.
Right.
After 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Joe Biden's approval rating really has just taken a nosedive recently, right? And he's tried to explain why, that this is not his fault, and a lot of these are just influences out of his control, right? But
so this is something people in Bangladesh or people from outside the USA, they don't understand. They think Trump got like 50% of the American votes. So 50% Americans are racist. That's what people have, the perception people have from outside of the USA, right? But what they don't understand is people supported Trump. You want to go ahead and take that? Okay. People supported Trump not because of his rhetoric, but despite his rhetoric. Do you agree? Do you agree?
Right, yeah.
So all the issues, immigration, maybe, I don't know, healthcare, I don't know, like immigration was the big issue probably for a lot of people.
Right.
And also like every other front. So what people don't understand here, when when the political campaign starts, the candidates talk about all sorts of issues, like all sorts of areas, right? So people, when they voted for Trump, a lot of those people don't support what he says, don't support his rhetoric, don't support his xenophobic statements, and yet they voted for Trump over the candidate he was fighting against because of the policy positions, right? Right. So you are from South Carolina, right? I mean, no, you are from New York.
Originally, I lived in New York.
Lived in New York. You were born and raised in New York in your earlier days.
Mostly in South Carolina, though.
Mostly, yeah. But in your earlier days, you were there, right? How long you were there? I kind of
Just
forgot.
a few years.
Just a few years.
Yeah.
And then you moved to South Carolina and spent most of your life here. Okay. How do you, what's your thought about, I don't know, maybe the difference you see between South Carolina or maybe the South and the North, the culture? People probably from Bangladesh, they don't know the difference, but like you and I would probably have some idea if you know the history and the stuff, how the Civil War and all this stuff, that there's a gulf between the North and the South. Is it still the same?
I think that it's just purely, you have to look at it from economy, the demographic makeup. You have to look at all the different factors, right? So let's just take it one thing at a time, right? Demographics wise, the South is entirely different in terms of ethnic makeup, right? It's mostly purely white and black Americans that live here, right? Whereas the Northeast is full of transplants, it's full of ethnic diversity. The South, most of the people here are families that have been residing for multiple generations. Right. Some people have been living here all the way since the Revolutionary War. Right. Whereas in the North, you have a lot of incoming people that have just maybe spent 1 or 2 generations here. So the South is really built on these fundamental kinship ties. Right. True. And the North is totally different, right? So over here, these kinship ties kind of lead to a sense of community. The South is very big on community. It's really big on these cozy, warm relationships with your neighbor, with people around you. People are much more willing to talk, much more willing to listen, much more willing to stop. I think also it's because just the lifestyle pace here, the cities are smaller. So people are just, more likely to run into each other. So the South, I see, it's just like a kind of, in some aspects, I see the South as being very warm, communal, and friendly. Whereas the North is not like that, just because of the social makeup is different, right? So that's one aspect. So a lot of people automatically look at the South as backwards, racist, intolerant. But in some ways, the South has certain qualities that are, I think, I guess, more pleasant,
So you, as someone who is a first-generation American, Your parents are from Pakistan. You are from here. Um, do you find home? I don't know, like a better home here in the south or in the north?
I haven't spent a lot of time in the north, but I would say that
Or which part in the USA? Midwest, West Coast, East
where
Coast,
do I
North?
feel like I'm most at home?
Most welcome, most at home,
Most
most.
at home, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a really hard one to answer, right? Because in some ways, you feel more accustomed to the place where you spent most of your time, right? So I am very familiar with the area you and I have traveled a bit in South Carolina.
Let me take a step back because there are two parts to this question. What first part being as an American, where do you like find or do you feel more comfortable maybe? And
Right.
as a first generation American, do you see where I'm coming from? So there are two parts. So as an American, as just any other American, that's a difficult question to answer. You said right, and as a first generation American, does it make any difference to that answer?
Yeah, I think that people who come from Asian culture, South Asian culture, I think naturally we have a predisposition towards our culture, and we want to be among people who are from that part of the world. We want to have we want to have a little bit of cultural um, experience, right? And so yeah, you really get to sample your culture when you live in larger urban areas. And I think in the United States, me being Pakistani American, the Pakistani hubs are predominantly New York, DC, Houston, maybe, and a few other cities, right? And so, ideally, if I want to feel like I'm really at home, in terms of being amongst people from my cultural background, then yes, I would say New York. But I also enjoy being in South Carolina. As much as I rag on it, as much as I talk trash about South Carolina, I mean, living here for decades really kind of instills kind of
And that too in Colombia, right?
a sense of belonging. Yes.
Okay. So and I have talked so much about like we have talked about everything, and one aspect about your life that fascinates me that I mentioned a lot of times, that is you have this unique perspective of because you kind of know a little bit of not a little bit of a little bit of our culture, and of course this is your own culture. So when we're talking about like U.S. culture, like you have pointed out in the past, I can follow and I can connect because I follow the news here, right? All the details and the cultural nuances. So we can connect, we can talk, we can keep talking and stuff. So we have some common grounds there. And when we're talking about our culture, Desi culture, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, for the most part, similar culture, you can also connect to that as well. You can communicate, you can keep talking, you can continue the conversation because you know a little bit about our culture. So you have this unique. I always try to get into your head and try to kind of vicariously experience your experience. So, I mean, you have seen photos of Pakistan and Pakistan photos and videos, of course. When you went there the first time, was it a huge shock factor? Or was it like, do you remember that? Because we tend to underestimate the feeling as time progresses, the first time we have a huge shock factor, and as time progresses, as we keep talking about that fact, it becomes less pronounced. You see what I'm talking about?
Right.
So try to go back in time and try to kind of share.
That's a good question. That's a good question. I agree with you. I think that the intensity of the experience kind of dulls with every visit.
Right. It becomes more it becomes more, or maybe it becomes less. I don't know. The shock factor is not there as as it was the first time. So try to go back in time and try to share that.
I think my first experience in Pakistan was probably around 1992, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah.
How old was
I was about 4 or 5 at the time.
Do you still remember?
I remember little bits and pieces of it. I don't remember entirely all of it, but I do remember.
This is something I really want to know because I have two kids, and they will go home. I mean, to Bangladesh at some point. And so, what was it like?
I just remember it being a pleasant experience, but I do remember obviously kind of
You said was or wasn't?
was, but I just remember I just think at that age the brain is not developed enough to really understand what's going on, right? So you might be able to remember a few little tidbits of the experience, but you really can't concretely. You can't really. It's not enough for me to like give you an analysis.
Right.
But
Makes sense.
I had a pleasant experience. I remember that much. It was my first experience. I actually.
didn't know you went Pakistan that early.
Yeah, I was 4. I actually went to Saudi that time too.
Okay.
So I got like a double dip of experience because I went to Saudi, and then I went to Pakistan in the same 2-3 month time span. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
How many times have you visited Pakistan?
Altogether, maybe 5.
5 times. So that's not too many.
Not too many, but I mean, I think 5 is a good number.
What was the gap between your first and the second visit? How long was the gap? When was the second time? Do you remember the year?
3 years. The next gap was 6 years.
Okay. All right.
The next gap was in 2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's when you're kind of mature now.
Yeah.
And like, what did you think of that?
Or it may have been 2000 actually. And at that time, I was aware a little bit, right? At that time, if you recall, Pakistan was going through some political unrest. Musharraf was.
You said 2001.
2000, I believe.
2000, okay.
Musharraf was taking over by coup.
And 9/11 happened in 2001, right? So that's before.
9/11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because the war changed after 9/11. Okay.
Yeah, Pakistan changed a lot after 9/11, but before this was like a pivotal period because Musharraf was going to take over the country, and I just remember I remember when I went to the airport, there were all these protesters outside. I didn't understand, right? But I kind of understood a little bit of what was happening. It was very interesting. Yeah, so I went to Pakistan then. I went to Pakistan, I think 2 years after that. And then most recently, I went to Pakistan like 15 years later in 2017. And that was quite a shock, right? That was quite a shock.
Give us that perspective, that global or that cross-cultural perspective. Because that's something, understand this, like I keep saying, like you are in a position that like 99.99% of us, the people in the audience, they will never be able to enter your head and be able to, kind of, they will not resonate with the things you will say. So try to kind of share with us your feeling as a,
I think
the cross-cultural experience.
I think that, take any 2 countries, on opposite sides of the globe.
That's the fascinating
part, if you take 2 countries on opposite sides of the globe, you might assume that there's a world of difference between 2 countries. But I don't look at it that way. I look at people as all very predictable and the same. Right? I think that culture just adds a little minor variation to people, but I don't think it's
minor variation.
Yeah,
you're sure about that?
I think so. Okay. I think people, like at baseline, all people are very much identical.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Yes,
baseline,
at the core, all people
at
behave the same way,
core,
think the same way,
right.
and then their culture, their upbringing changes them.
Right.
And then now you're telling me that the change is minor, and I cannot disagree more. I feel like that's the major difference between, people from all different parts of the world.
Well, I think people tend to overestimate their cultural allegiance. I think people overestimate their nationalistic ties. I think people overestimate stuff. I think a lot of people, it's really easy for people to give up parts of their culture. It's really easy for people to forfeit their ties. I think a lot of people tend to look at themselves as being deeply intertwined with their culture, but in reality, we're not.
Yes, that's true.
We shed our identity all the time. You came to America and you are a lot different than you were the first time I met you, right? And you will continue to kind of evolve into a different person. So I don't think culture is something that is just like stamped and tattooed on us forever.
Yeah, no, that I absolutely agree with. Yeah, the fact that, the other day I was listening to this podcast to Bangladeshi people. They know about U.S. culture. They both visited U.S. And so they were talking about the struggle for the first generation, not the first generation American, but the first generation immigrants like your parents. So that's true. They go through a phase of a struggle because they are caught up between two different cultures. They're trying to kind of blend with the culture here, trying to get along, and at the same time they have their values from their previous past culture and stuff like that. But for you, this is your home, this is your place, and that a lot of our parents don't understand. For example, what I keep poking fun at you about is like you probably identify yourself more as a Pakistani than an American, and I keep poking fun about that fact. Like so for you, for my sons, this is their country, this is their culture, and a lot of our parents, especially our Desi parents, who are from this culture where they try to exercise too much authority on their kids, right? They try to control every aspect of their children's life. I actually made a discussion about this the other day, how Desi kids, for the most part, are first generation kids, they are leaving their parents, leaving their house because their Desi parents are trying to control their life too much. So that kind of stuff, like, so that's the thing, like, this is their, so people from our country, a lot of people are upset that these kids are leaving their culture behind. But what they don't understand is they're not leaving their culture behind. This is their culture. Their parents have left their cultures behind, right?
Right.
So they're trying to make this point like, oh, all these kids, they are forgetting their roots and blah. No, that's not their roots to begin with, right? So that's something I don't know. I don't agree with. But anyways, now the next thing that probably most people from Bangladesh and most probably international people are interested to hear. America is a country of racism. America is a country filled with racist. The West is, filled with racist people because of the colonial history. So that kind of, about Desi culture, right? So they always keep talking about those stuff because that kind of probably makes them feel good, right? Colonial history, racism, blah, 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 all that stuff.
Blame the white man.
Yeah, blame the white man all the time. Everything is their fault. If it wasn't for the white people, it wasn't for the colonial history, they would have conquered the world, stuff like that. So, but it's also true that there are racism that exists in this culture. One or two people, I haven't faced any racism in my 10 years of life, not even the slightest racism. But there are people who probably faced one or two instances. And in my own country, I would face far more cases and instances of discrimination than I would ever hear. And yet they would complain about this culture. So that's something, you get that part. Now, my question is, have you experienced in your 27, 30 years of lifetime, have you ever experienced any sort of racism or discrimination because of your ethnicity, because of your color? If yes, to what degree?
I think that living in South Carolina predominantly for most of my life, where you're not in a very diverse society, you tend to be kind of hyper aware. You tend to be very conscientious about who you are, your identity, right? Even if people are not displaying any signs of
direct hostility,
or there's no overt racism, you still constantly feel this chip on your shoulder. You constantly feel like someone is judging you. And I think that that's something that pretty much anytime you are a minority, anywhere you go, right? A white person going to Bangladesh or India would feel the same way, right? True. You're always going to feel
you're out of place.
You're out of place. And as much as people can try to make you feel, I think in recent times it's changed a lot, because I think that the social fabric of America has changed entirely, especially within just like the last couple of years. I think we're becoming a lot more tolerant than we've ever been towards not just race, but we're all these gender fluidity movements and things like that. We're just embracing everybody, right? And this is unprecedented, right?
And all these changes have taken place within last a decade, right? Within a decade or so.
And I don't know if it's just a consequence of me getting older that I'm feeling less aware of my self-identity. I'm feeling less out of place, because sometimes as you get older, you also tend to care less.
I would put it this way: you are getting more mature.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
That's possible, but I also think that society is becoming more tolerant and open, and that also makes you feel more, comfortable where you are.
So the mind barrier. So I think the point you're making here is the mental barrier it's not there as you
as
are
much, but
aging, right?
But also, let's be honest. I've lived in cities. Colombia, we can argue, is not a city. We can argue it's a big town, but it's a city. And as a city, most cities tend to have some greater degree of tolerance than small towns. And I think that if you go just 20 minutes outside of Colombia, you might find yourself really out of place, right? You might find yourself like you're in like a 1800s,
So I have an interesting follow-up question here. It's an important question for me personally, for me as well. So that is, what's your thought about, like, what do you think, how much that mental barrier for a first generation kid comes from, I wouldn't use the word blame, but the responsibility goes onto the shoulder of their parents. Did their parents do a good job at making them feel at home, or making them feel like they belong here? So as a parent, like, me, like, I will always try to make sure my children understand that this is their culture, they belong here, go get it. I'll tell my son, like, you can be the president of the United States, right? So, like, that kind of stuff, like, you belong here, this is your country. So do you think for a lot of the parents, the first generation parents, they are not giving their kids that confidence and that sense of belonging? Do you think it lacks? One of the starting points maybe is like lies somewhere there?
I think one of the issues is that Desis want to retain their culture, and they want their kids to, they want to transmit that to their kids, and they want their kids to keep a part of that still with them. And when you grow up biculturally, it's kind of sometimes confusing, right? Because you're conflicted. It's like growing up in a family where both head of households have differing religious opinions. You tend to struggle to reconcile which is yours. And I think that I think it's okay to give your kids a little sense of their mother culture. There should be a delicate balance. I think that if you overwhelm them with it, then they're not able to integrate into this culture, right? You have to give them just a little bit, but not so much to the point where they can't conform with the society, right? This should be their primary culture, right? Because as you said, this is where they were born, and so this should take the role of their primary culture. But they should always be able to appreciate their mother culture as well, right? And so I'm not against, for that reason, someone teaching their kids their mother tongue, right? I think that if you want to do that, by all means, go for it.
You speak good Urdu. You speak good Punjabi as well, right? I cannot judge if it's good or not, but I mean, I can a little bit maybe.
Yeah. I would say that many of my Pakistani peers tend to be amazed sometimes when I tell them that I'm from the U.S. Many of them think that I just got here a couple months ago.
Okay, based on your Urdu speaking?
Based on
my
knowledge of Pakistan, and just very things that are uniquely specific to the culture that you would have to spend a great deal of time there to pick up those things. Yeah.
Interesting. Right. Yeah. So these are personal questions because
and I want to also say that the more you let the child, or any, like, if say we're on the topic of parenting and you want your kid to integrate into a culture, a lot of parents tend to want to keep their kids still segregated in a way. They want their kids to only hang out with kids of a particular background, racial background. I don't think that's a good idea at all.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
I think that the kids should find their natural proclivity. I mean, growing up, I had a wide, diverse background of friends, and I ended up leaning more towards, Spanish culture too. I got interested in that. I took it upon myself to learn Spanish. I speak it well. Yeah, I can communicate. Yeah, I can communicate in Spanish fairly well. And so, to me, just having curiosity. I think one thing you should instill in your children is curiosity of the world, and you should just let that curiosity guide them, and that will guide them towards whatever principles they acquire in life, whatever thoughts and attitudes they have about the world, who they associate with. But definitely don't cut them off. Definitely do not pigeonhole them into one category.
Which is unfortunately is the case with most Desi parents.
A lot of people do that by just emphasizing or overemphasizing one thing, such as pushing, their view of religion on the child, or pushing their view of culture on the child. Hey, this is the superior way to worship, or this is the superior way to whatever, do things, right? But we're all different, and we have to just kind of appreciate everyone's viewpoint.
So you see, like our parents, they would never want to let go. They would like to, control, make all the decisions for you when you're 18, 22, 30, 35, even right now, right? Your mom, your dad would try to make all the decisions for you. Every little decision they'll try to control, right? So, and that's not probably healthy, right? Like we don't like it. So why would you like it for your children? But we don't appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's not good for psychological development, right? The key is to a lot of parents want their kids to just follow a rigid set of commands, right? That does not create creativity. That does not create intelligence. That does not create any of the skills that you need to develop at an early age. If you let your kid do what your kid wants to do and have some minimal supervision, I think that's what most people, the consensus of psychologists and doctors and educators, agree that that's the way to raise your kid. Because by this style of constant helicoptering over your child, your child doesn't learn from its mistakes.
And that's the thing, our Desi people will not never, but like they will not be able to wrap their mind around that idea.
And the problem with that is that it's twofold, because the child is, this child's learning becomes stagnant, but B is because the child also gets a dependency on the parent, because the parent is dictating the child's life choices and telling the kid what to do exactly from an early age. So as the child gets older, the child continues to rely on parent suggestions, continues to depend on parent, doesn't move out the house.
They're not taking risks like
right. Yeah. Over here, it's like you let the kid develop. It's kind of like in nature, right?
Right.
Animals rear their offspring for a little bit, and then that's it. You're good to go, right? So I think that this is a big issue that Desi parents specifically are. They may be unaware of this, but they're contributing to a big issue, because you're basically babying your child.
Yes, and try to spoon feed everything, and and who is a better person to kind of explain that than someone like you who are from both culture, who is from both culture.
Yeah, I definitely think that the American culture, in some ways, in terms of let me finish that point later.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like these are important topics, and these are important discussions. And like, for example, religion is a big thing in our culture. People they're lying all the time. They're also doing all sorts of fraudulence, all sorts of cheating, and they're still big on religion. So you know the game, right? So they would be really nervous and anxious. What would be the religion of their child and stuff like that. So like my kind of take is, like, I teach my child as long as I should. That's important, as long as I should, right? And then after a certain point, when I think they have enough maturity, they have enough understanding, and I have instilled what I thought is the right thing to instill, and then I let them make their own decision, right? If they still decide to become non-religious, then that's their decision. That could be because I did not do a good job at, making them convinced about the religion thing. It could be my fault, or it could be just that they have made their own decision and then do. So I'm talking about religion in particular because, like, in our culture, there's the first and the foremost thing that comes to their mind, like, oh, my child will become an atheist, he'll no longer be a Muslim and stuff like that. So from that fear, they try to kind of control their child as much as they can, because you see, their son will start living together, their son will start having girlfriends, become atheists, start drinking and stuff like that. But like, how long can you control a child? Is it even healthy? Do you should even do that?
Yeah, this goes back to my point about you should try to teach the child not what to think, but how to think. But I think that the child still needs you still need some scaffolding early on. You still need to give the child some framework. But I think that really also depends on you as a person. There are a lot of people who are not very devout themselves. They don't have strong religious beliefs, convictions. And my God, if you are not convinced, then how are you going to convince your children, right? There are many people that don't display any acts of, worship. They're not praying. They're not going to mosque, but they still want their kids to prescribe to that. So I think that this is something that some people need to kind of wrangle this with inside of themselves before they have kids. They need to understand, hey, am I going to dictate what my child should believe in, or am I going to just kind of loosely nudge them, or which way are we going to do this? Because a lot of people themselves don't understand their own religious beliefs, right? A surprisingly high number of people don't really understand where they lie on the religious spectrum. And I think that problem also
and what the religion asks of them.
Right. And that problem also gets kind of more complicated, because if you're having a child, then it's not just you, it's also your spouse and where they lie on the religious scale. So I think that's something that you both need to figure out. But I am a firm believer that you should give your child more, you should expose them to options. And I that's a controversial. I think that's a controversial. That's controversial for some people, because some people are like, that's a
heresy.
Yeah, that's quite a bold thing to say. But I really think that I don't think anyone should be coerced into any belief, right? I think that especially children, because children are very naive, they're very gullible, and they're willing to form a strong opinion about anything they're told at an early age and stick to it forever. So what you need to do is you need to just give them the tools, the instruments. And I think instead of, disciplining your child when he does something wrong or make a mistake, you need to help your child figure out logically why what he did is wrong, or you need to just help him build the logical mindset. If you help your child build logic at an early age, then your child, I think, will navigate these difficult topics more comfortably in life, because these are difficult topics. Even to this day, you consider yourself a Muslim, I consider myself Muslim, but we still have identity issues from time to time. Right.
Yeah, we have lots of questions, and you use the word logic, and you probably know it as much as I do, that this is something people from our culture are really scared of. They dread the word logic. They try to run away from logic as fast as they can, right? So that's an issue as well, because in our culture, we don't teach our people, our folks, our kids to reason.
I think we are very
kind of overdo it,
dogmatic when it comes to like principles and morals. We tend to we want our kids to just blindly accept our cultural viewpoints. We want them to inherit our religious viewpoints. And I think that's a little selfish.
Sure. Now here's something important. The other day I also discussed this point. Now I would welcome your advice and your suggestion and your opinion on this. What do you think is a right balance? Or so, for example, I don't know, how do I put this? So when my kids, my sons will go to college, my thinking is, I was actually reading an article by a psychologist the other day, and he was also making this point that the kids here in this U.S. culture, or in the Western culture, parents don't have control over their kids. And they make all sorts of decisions at this age, probably bad decisions, then a lot of bad decisions. Now, do you think it's because my thinking is, I will try to not let my son become financially independent until he finishes his college. Like, it's difficult in this culture. He will want to kind of work in the summer. He would want to work and make his stuff like that. But my thinking is that I will keep him dependent on me financially until he finishes his college. So do you think that's a good notion? That's a reasonable notion? I'll have some leverage there
I think it's a good idea to do that, because I think in America, once you interfere with education and education gets messed up, then I think that it's really hard to kind of recover from that. So I think it's very important to make sure that those 4 years of college or high school are uninterrupted. The person is giving their sole energy, attention towards education. Also, if you are the one that is, giving your child an allowance or helping your child financially, it helps you regulate their decisions because you are the one that can monitor where that money is going, right? If your child is making money, they don't have to ask you for permission where to spend it, and they can spend it on all sorts of things. So I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, that's of course that thinking is based on a lot of the things I follow, the things I read, and based on my understanding and stuff. And so I thought maybe I will not try to spoon feed my son, micromanage my son's life, but I can at least have that leverage and that have some control to some extent.
Right. I mean, in a college setting, for example, we're here in university. Parents oftentimes kind of subsidize their children's expenses. And the children whose parents subsidize their expenses, oftentimes I see that they're more well behaved.
Wow.
They're more well behaved because the parents will have a cutoff limit on how much they can spend on, say, Uber.
Right.
So the kids are not going around partying to different locations randomly.
I needed that. Like, how do you say it? Like on-field confirmation.
Yeah, because what happens is that if you are 20, 21 years old, you're bound to make bad decisions. Right. You're not emotionally mature. You're not there yet. So you're going to act on impulse more than you're on reason. And a lot of these kids, what they do is they will take out loans in college, or they will find a temporary employment, and they will use that money mostly to fuel destructive habits. So I think that if a parent is the one who is the purse book, I think it's a lot more, it's there's more oversight there. And I think that that's a lot better for the kid. I think it's detrimental for any person 20, 21 years old to have a couple $1,000s laying around, in my opinion. I don't think most 20, 21-year-olds take that money and do something clever with it, right? I think most of them use that money for things that are not too good for them.
My advisor doesn't touch alcohol. But so how do you think, like, how do you tackle this then? Like if your kid, if he's in his freshman year, like how do you tackle that situation? How do you tackle that?
I think that parents in America have to deal with a lot at that age because it's a very the child is very fragile, emotionally, mentally. Experiencing this college life for the first time, a lot of these kids are not adequately prepared for what's in store for them, right? So I think that a parent needs to be really involved in their kids' college experience. I think that a lot of kids who were seemingly okay in adolescence, early adolescence in high school, tend to take a downward turn in college. So I think that these are 4 critical years that I think that parents need to be very involved. And I would venture to say they should be overly involved. They should even
that goes to the point of me
overprotection, making sure that they are coming home during the weekend, checking their financial statements, making sure that they're not with the wrong crowd. I think that this is very important because so many people, believe it or not, just about a mile from us yesterday, there was a shooting here.
Yeah.
At USC.
Right, like one person got killed.
Died, right? I'm pretty sure alcohol was involved in this shooting.
Do you know the full story? Like someone walked into the house.
I don't know the full story, but I know there was an argument. But 5 points every weekend. USC actually publishes a made to public blotter, which tells you every day what the crimes were, what the incident was, and it gives you like all the specifics. And you see so many common themes. You see aggravated assault, sexual assault, all these things that could be avoided. Alcohol is usually one of the main driving factors of all these issues. So I think that
probably number one, if I'm not wrong.
My personal view, actually, if we're talking about the subject of drinking, is that I don't think the drinking age should be 21. I think it should be even higher. I think the drinking age should be 24. I think that one could argue then that might,
if 21 is 20 by the
because 21 is the drinking age in America, but in reality there's so
kids are drinking,
so many underage kids who are drinking,
right?
18, 19, 20, 21, right? They've done better measures now to kind of ensure that IDs are not being falsely duplicated. They've done many things to curtail underage drinking, but it's a rampant problem in most college campuses, especially here. So I think that the cutoff should really be higher. I think that would deter more people.
How would that make any difference if 21 is not working already? I mean, 21, 24, they're still getting...
I think because a lot of people who are 21 or pretend to be 21 can pass off as 21. It's a lot harder for an 18-year-old to pass off as 24, 25.
I see what you're saying.
See what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, it should be very apparent, right? I think 18 to 21 is kind of hard to tell sometimes. So I think they need to bump it up a little bit. I think that would help in a way. I just think that I don't think that introducing kids to any harmful substances this early is healthy. I don't think nicotine should be available for someone 18 years old. That's my personal
What's your thought on marijuana?
I think that marijuana is actually, same viewpoint. I think that you should wait until somebody has reached some maturity. Also, you're not developed mentally at that age, and marijuana can have a lot of unintended consequences. So most of the research towards marijuana shows that under 18, marijuana can cause you lifelong effects to your brain. So I think that marijuana has therapeutic benefits, and I think that those therapeutic benefits should be reserved for people who really need it, not an 18-year-old who just wants to have fun and get stoned.
So is that a cutoff age the same for kids, to have access to marijuana for recreational purpose or for medical purposes?
I haven't thought about it thoroughly, but I just think 18 years old.
Is it still 18 for kids?
No, I believe it's 21.
Oh, I'm sorry, 21.
Yeah,
okay.
For marijuana.
Okay.
But I think in South Carolina, marijuana is not legal, right? You don't have access to it.
I smell marijuana all the time.
Yeah. So one of the alarming trends in America, which I think is spreading worldwide, I think America has actually cleaned up one act, which is smoking, because smoking has dropped dramatically in popularity since the advent of vaping. Vaping has caused smoking to go down dramatically. And I think that you can attest to this, that there are probably more smokers in South Asia than there are in America. There are a lot of people back home in Pakistan, girls especially, believe it or not, who think it's cool to smoke cigarettes, right? Which came as a shock to me because I assumed that it would be the other way around, but it's actually not. Most people back home like to smoke.
Like our culture is trying to catch up to Western culture.
Western culture has now began to kind of portray smoking as being something that's vile and disgusting. And so they found vaping as a acceptable substitute for it. Is it acceptable? I don't think so. I think that vaping has made people just falsely comfortable, just kind of fall into this notion that it's okay for your health. So now vaping has taken like an 800% skyrocket leap in America. So everywhere you go on college campus, everyone has a little thing in their hand, smoking, and they're putting nicotine in their body. I'm sure that's not.
I see one or two article every time pops up. It talks about like how vaping is as bad as smoking cigarettes and stuff like that.
I mean, what I'm saying is that kids. These companies exploit young, underdeveloped minds. These companies, these alcohol companies, these cigarette companies, these vaping companies, and I just think that America needs to pass better legislation. They need to up the age for all these.
Now, here's the political questions. How much do you think, like all these rules and regulations and policies, how much of it is driven by the because it's a lobbyist, and how much of it is just being complicated, because these are complicated decisions you need to make. There is a fine line, there is a balance you have to make, how much you can control, how much the state should control, right? Like, these are difficult questions. So do you think there is like, is it all bad faith stuff going on, or is it a good faith stuff because things are, complicated? And
also things are complicated, but I know something is not right when there's so many contradictory legislations passed.
For example,
for example, you have, say we were just talking about marijuana. It is identified as, the same scheduled substance as, I think, heroin. Right? We can both agree that heroin has substantially more devastating effects. Right? So I think there's something going on, right? So you think there are there's definitely some, because things don't make sense.
But it doesn't seem that way. All this discussion you see, like, is at the national level, and because how many states do you know? How many states have legalized marijuana?
I think it's maybe 30-40%
or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think, like, that this, from based on my experience from following the discussion, it's the fact is that the matter of the fact is that it's being legalized because it's about time. There is, like, we had all these. I mean, I'm not supportive of marijuana. I've never smoked marijuana. I never will. My sons never will, hopefully. But I'm just coming from a, just from a I don't know.
Why hopefully not? It's not a horrible thing.
I know, but like, I'm just saying, look, people might think, oh, I want to smoke marijuana, and that's why I'm defending it. But what I'm trying to say is, like, it doesn't look like it's coming from an interest or a vested interest. Like, all these policies and legislations, they're not coming from a vested interest. They're coming from genuine realization. The previous notion we had, recreational marijuana and marijuana, how do you say it, prescription marijuana.
We're slowly but surely getting there. I think that eventually it will be legalized very soon in all 50 states, and maybe in the next 5 years. Time will tell what happens in terms of, are we having now a lot of DUIs for marijuana, because marijuana does inhibit your senses, it does inhibit your perception, it does create a lot of other issues, but I can't think of,
right now there is no law against driving after having marijuana.
I think they would have to. Alcohol is a lot easier to measure, right? If you take a breathalyzer and you're above a certain limit, then you're considered unsuitable to drive. But with marijuana, I don't know what the exact determinant would be, right? How would they assess if you're too impaired to drive?
Did they try to assess? Did they try to impose the law?
I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure they have to have something, some way to gauge how high someone is, right? There has to be some way to gauge it, right?
You'd think, yeah.
I mean, you have red eyes right now. You might be detected as a false positive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, because a lot of people smokes marijuana right now.
Yeah.
And there should be a way to gauge.
Sure. I think that we'll see what happens. We'll definitely see what happens. It'll be interesting to see. But I think marijuana is something that if they legalize it suddenly tomorrow, I don't think things will change dramatically. Yeah, because there's so many people using it recreationally. Like you said, you smell it wafting through the air everywhere you go. So I don't think that it's something like dramatic. When we legalize it, I don't think everything is going to suddenly change. But I think that it is going to have huge implications for people in prison, those who are incarcerated, because a lot of people have been in prison for marijuana. They're going to have to find a way to now give clemency suddenly to a bunch of people. And I think that does kind of complicate the legal system a little bit, possibly.
So I guess this is the last point we'll touch. It's not been too long, 1 hour. So now, the criminal justice system in the U.S. It's a big point of discussion and debate.
It's a shit pile.
Yeah, it's a shit pile right there. Okay, you don't want to poke it too much.
Yeah.
But then, there are all these. There is this notion. Oh, it's all about racism. It's not always about racism, right? Like, you and I talk about this stuff, because a lot of the communities, they are still behind for various reasons, for historical reasons, for whatever reason. Okay, so if you look at the statistics, the crime rate and stuff like that, the demographics and stuff like that, if you look at that, there is a correlation Now, why? Is that because of their race? No, it's not because of race. It's not because of blood. It's not because of color. It's because of the circumstances they were brought up in, and they are somewhat forced by society, by their circumstances to kind of do crimes and stuff. What's your thought on the arguments people make that there is a big role of racism behind the criminal justice system and the marijuana? That's why I came to that point, because a lot of people are behind the bar because of carrying marijuana, right?
Yeah, I mean,
do you think for the most part it's driven by racism, or do you think for the most part is the way it is?
It would make sense that someone who comes from a financially disadvantaged background is trying to make some money selling marijuana, for example, which is why you see a disproportionate number of African Americans who are in prison for that very reason. So their circumstances do dictate why they get in trouble for those things.
I mean, there are discrimination, there are systematic discrimination to some extent in some areas. Sometimes there is no denying that fact, but it's not.
But I think this is kind of how I see it. I see it as, yes, there has been historical discrimination for a while.
Right.
At what point do we start saying the historical discrimination has faded away? At what point do we say, hey, it's no longer there? Obviously, there are still residual effects, but at what point do we say it's completely gone? It's really hard to measure that.
Right. So you see, there is this difference between institutional discrimination or systemic discrimination and like discrimination at the individual level. Like the system, there are people who will make the argument that the racism is still institutionalized in the USA. It's still systematic. I don't tend to agree with that argument fully,
Right.
because
people are basically, they're saying that black people are being unfairly singled out and targeted, right? I do think that there are studies that are done that try to kind of eliminate all noise and try to like just prove that, hey, blacks are more likely to be victim of police violence, gun crime, whatever. There are a few studies that point at that, right? But then you have studies that conflict that. There's really nothing strong, basically. And
I'm making that point because in our culture we have this one-dimensional. We have this like very clear view that it's all about racism. It's all, and they literally go to YouTube to watch just those to support those narratives.
Right.
And things are not as straightforward as they think, or they would like to think.
Right. I mean, listen, all cities in America that are more than 40% African American, New York, Baltimore, Detroit, cities like these, there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of assaults, robberies, homicides, and majority of those people who commit those crimes are black. So there's no denying that. We have to now, if someone commits a crime, is it racist to incarcerate them? Is it racist to lock them up? No.
So now the question comes when a white folk does a crime kind of equal gravity, and he gets away. So the law is being applied. The law is being applied to the black folk. That makes sense. But the same law is not being applied to the white folk all the time. That gives you the notion of the law is that discrimination. But now here's.
But I think, especially in light of the recent events in America in the last 4 or 5 years, the gun violence towards Black Americans, I think that there was a lot of media hysteria that was showing that America is just out there randomly targeting black men. And the truth is that there were a few notable incidences, but if you compare it year by year and you look at just the decade, there was not any real sharp uptick in, police officer brutality towards Black Americans.
And you see, you are a person of color.
Yeah, but
you are saying this. You should be you should be on the receiving end. Like according to you should be on the receiving end. You should be someone who vociferously protests any notion against it. But you are you're talking. So that's the thing. Like these are the discussions people don't get to hear.
My viewpoint is that it exists, but I think that it exists far less than what.
People would like it to exist.
I definitely think it exists. I feel like, I think, if you are in law enforcement and majority of suspects you apprehend are African American for certain crimes, especially in these crime-ridden cities, then you are naturally primed to think this person is a criminal. Okay, so
or go on the high alert mode.
So you go into natural high alert mode because this is what you've experienced. So if you want to call that racism, if you want to call that prejudice, or you want to call that just your experience and being kind of precautious.
So that's the distinction I make: individual discrimination versus institutional discrimination. There are people who are on the individual level, you know, they might have some prejudice, some bias, some predisposition for whatever reason, maybe based on their experience with dealing with, you know, criminals. Maybe that's because of, you know, their history, their upbringing, whatever reason that may be. There are folks there that are racist at the individual level, but at the systemic level, at the systematic level, at the institutional level, I don't agree with that kind of, you know, argument like it's a rampant racism, you know, at the systemic level, at the systematic level.
I think that's the problem in the world. America is seen as a country where black people are just being shot down and mowed over by the police. That's not the case.
I mean, you and I have disagreed and argued over videos that came out, right? Like you thought that I thought that there was excessive force applied, and you thought no, the force was applied was justified. Right. So you and I also have had disagreements over. So you see how it's subjective.
Yeah, I think that it's really easy for all of us to sit here as armchair quarterbacks and look at situations and say, oh, I would have done this differently, or why didn't he do this differently, especially when the situation
like that, in a tense situation.
In a tense situation like that. I think it's a police officer job is very hard, especially when you are patrolling some very crime-ridden areas. And I think that, you know, in the moment, you know.
But I would say this, bro, you and I had these discussions, disagreements, and debates since ever, that I do think the police in the USA, I mean, even compared to police from other countries, like other Western countries, the police here is first, they are more aggressive, first, based on what I see. Second,
we don't have a AK-47 slung around our shoulder.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. Like here, everyone have arms here.
Yeah, but the arms are concealed. We don't. You know, we don't get the police in America.
I forgot that for a second.
Does not give this intimidating presence as they do in countries like Pakistan, India, and I think
even in other Western, I mean, even the other Western cultures. Here, there are more guns than people.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone has gun, and so the cops are on the high alert mode. Like it makes sense. And also, I would say this: I have seen instances where the application of force was excessive, unjustified, unreasonable, and it was clearly racist in my eyes.
Right. So I think that possibly there might have been a much higher number of incidences before the introduction of video camera and video footage. Now everyone is able to broadcast and record things that are happening to them. Everyone has dash cams. Everyone has cameras everywhere. So I feel like now all these things are becoming more publicized. And it's very possible that these issues were existing for a long time, and now they've been brought to the limelight. But I still think that if you look at all recorded instances, the facts simply say that there has not been a sharp uptick, right? You have some of these highly high-profile cases that have caused a lot of discussion and caused a lot of contentiousness in our society. And yeah, I hope that something good can come as a result of that, if there needs to be more effective measures to kind of curtail police brutality. But I think that the George Floyd riots, all these protests have actually led to a worsening situation, because now you have lawmakers who are acting for less police. They want police to be less equipped. And I don't feel like that's a reasonable solution, because I think that these communities, one thing that they're lacking is proper safety. And I think that these communities are kind of vigilante in a way, and you need more security. So I feel like these
I mean, and of course there are people, like two old people, who always go overboard with every issue, right? Like we know those people, they make a big fuss out of everything. I have another very interesting point: critical race theory. What's your take?
Oh man, I think that you should just allow.
I think you and I will be on the same page on this. I will give you that information up front. Go ahead.
What, Candace Owens?
No, I mean CRT. Do you support it introducing it into the school syllabus? So for our audience who probably don't know what critical race theory is, would you explain it
I
a
think
little
you
bit?
can explain it better than I can. Man.
No, I mean it's basically the history, the history of racism, the history of discrimination. So that will be a part of the curriculum, right?
Yeah.
So do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that it depends on where you're introducing.
Be yourself, because you and I will be on the same page. So I'll give you that comfort, okay? I'll give you that comfort.
This is no. This is
because let me. No, it's not. I mean, I don't think it has to be sensitive, because so the kids, they don't see color. Okay, kids don't see color. A white kid, a black kid will play with each other. They don't care. They don't bother, right? So I don't think at an age when kids don't see color, at that age, it's a good idea to make them see color.
Yeah.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because then they will, and especially in the early age, their feelings are strong, and they will carry that feeling for the rest of their lives. Like when you are mature, when you are hardened, then you can take all those hard, difficult stuff, difficult topics, difficult subjects, and stuff like that, and you have your independent thinking. But at that tender age, introducing kids to, like, they need to know it. Yes, when they grow up, they will find out. Maybe include it in some way in the curriculum when they grow up.
I agree with you.
But at the tender age, when they don't, a white kid doesn't look at a black kid as somebody else, or a black kid looking at a white kid and thinking his great grandfathers did that to my great grandfather. I don't think it's necessary to put that information into their mind at that age. They should be all playing together, having fun. So that's what I think.
I think that at that age, it can later on create a lot of
unnecessary division,
division, mistrust,
yeah,
guilt, misplaced blame, all these sorts of things. I think that they should introduce more subtler forms. I think that one thing to do, and when I was growing up, the history textbooks were quite lenient when it came to topics like colonialism and imperialism. When we were kids, we would have these fun, happy, cute stories about the Indians and the pilgrims. In reality, it was a bloodbath. But we were told that everyone was holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and that's not what was happening, right? And then this is the same for.
So that's the sparking. That was the spark, right? That's what kind of triggered others to kind of start talking about introducing the other side of the picture. Now, just because they were doing extreme stuff doesn't mean that you also have to do extreme stuff to compensate for that, right? We can talk about history, like how far back in history do you go? I mean, where do you start? Like, for example, if you talk about reparation, they talk about reparation, and I don't think it makes sense. I don't know. What do you think it makes sense?
How far back in history you go?
Yeah. How do you even make those reparations in the first place?
Oh, are you talking about reparations now?
Yeah. Like, how can you practically
assign a dollar amount or anything? I think reparations for Black people right now should be the government stepping up, getting more involved, giving more access to education for people.
Absolutely. I agree with that notion. Yes.
Giving more opportunities to technical
help them
colleges.
Now, right?
Help them now. Give them something that's actually, I'm a big believer. I think that ever since, especially when this pandemic unleashed this economic kind of, I was a big believer in not hand-downs. I was a big believer in hand-me-ups. Finding ways so that people's situation will continually improve over time, not just give people $1,400, $1,500 checks once and leave them to fend for themselves, right? So I'm a big believer in policy change, right? I'm a big believer that you should find ways to make sure that this is sustainable in the long run. I don't think giving people just a check every month is effective. I think that you need to focus on the core dilemmas that group is facing. And I think for Blacks, the core dilemmas, safety, access to education things like that.
Opportunity.
Right, which is why, again, I'm a very firm critic of defunding police. I think that's a stupid idea, right? I think that, as a child, you need to be able to feel safe and secure in your home, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, let's focus on that.
So that's an important point, because right now maybe some of the police are using excessive force in some situations, but if they get into that sense of uncertainties, you cannot spend a fraction of a second thinking at a situation, or whether I should go ahead or not, I should take action or not. You have a fraction of a second to think about, to make decisions, and like all these things happening around, that will make most of the officers think twice, and they don't have the time, at the situation they don't have the time. So
you can give an officer 1,000,000 hours of coaching and training, but when you go into that battle zone environment and someone is presenting with a weapon, or someone is
you don't even know if that guy have a weapon or not.
I mean, so
because a lot of Americans have.
I mean, you want to talk about police brutality, look no further than Pakistan, look no further than Bangladesh. They're always talking about police brutality in America,
I wouldn't
racism
even compare.
in America.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I mean, have you seen like just ordinary, just day-to-day police officers just swatting their batons at people?
Bro, you don't even know what happens in those countries. So I know.
So what I'm saying is,
you cannot even imagine what happens.
I think it's really easy to find flaws in the West and say, oh, these people are no better off than us. I would contend that we have our flaws, for sure, but to say that we are
making equivalence is just
there's no comparison.
That's the point I try to make to my folks.
There's not a comparison at all. I think that people want to see the West do bad. It makes them feel good about themselves. They get an ego boost. People get an ego boost when they see America failing. People get an ego boost when they see racism in America. They're like, oh, we feel a little bit better about ourselves. Maybe you shouldn't compare yourself to America, right?
In the first place.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you should
spend that time watching yourself, looking at yourself.
Right. And you kind of opened my eyes to that, because when we're talking about countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, these countries are like in the bottom of most
skills.
And one time I was having an argument with an Indian friend of mine, and we were talking about
nationalism, all full
of nationalism, and nationalism is an interesting topic. I want to talk about that really quickly before.
No, that's fine.
But we were talking about Human Development Index, which is a very reliable measure, objective measure of your country's the well-being of
lots of factors.
People like to think economy means you're doing well, but we're talking literacy. Most of your audience probably knows HDI, but the thing is, the person I was speaking to was very proud patriot, and they refused to believe it, or they thought it was tainted, or they thought it was biased. And I told them, hey, one of your own economists developed this. They actually got the Nobel Prize. I forgot the name of the person for helping in the early 90s.
Omer Ghazi.
Sen. I was like, this guy actually made this index, okay? So you take it up with him, okay? Your country is 150. Your country is 151. My country is 156.
Bangladesh is probably 190 or something. Okay.
No, Bangladesh is actually
higher. Was doing better.
Doing better. Bangladesh is like 1.
So this is something, bro. You and I mentioned that. I actually opened your eyes.
I
opened your eyes that Bangladesh is doing better than India, Pakistan.
You opened my eyes, because a lot has changed in a couple of the years.
Right.
If I had this conversation with you, in early 2000s, we about this, right?
True.
So it amazed me, because I guess I haven't been, researching or thinking about Bangladesh much until I met you, really, to see what's going on, the progress that's being made.
Just a quick second, just to redeem myself to my audience. So I have dispelled a lot of wrong notions about Bangladesh. I will show him statistics and data, how Bangladesh is kicking ass, India's ass, Pakistan's ass.
Before, I used to look at Bangladesh as, as dirt poor, Ethiopia, right? Now I look at Bangladesh as a place that I would probably feel perhaps more comfortable than in Pakistan, if you're talking about overall infrastructure economy.
True.
But also, I think here's another thing.
Make no mistake, there are areas where Pakistan is doing a lot better than Bangladesh.
So I will say this much. Pakistan is an interesting country because you have two entirely different parts of Pakistan. You have a very primitive western corridor, which is underdeveloped and falls really below like HDI.
Same with Bangladesh, yeah.
But then you have the eastern corridor, which is very progressive, economically robust. Cities like Lahore and Karachi.
Lahore, Karachi, I think is more modern than Dhaka is, I guess.
I would assume, I know Lahore, if we're looking at just like safety, Lahore is one of the safest cities in South Asia. If we're looking at HDI, Lahore's HDI probably competes with some South Carolina, maybe Mississippi. It's like 0.87 or something. It's high. It's relatively high. So is Karachi. So I think that maybe it's because that I have always seen Pakistan from just the lens of industrial cities, that I have never really looked at Pakistan as a whole. But I think that...
So all these indices I exposed you to, like those, if you look at those indices, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India is doing well in many indices. Pakistan is doing well in many indices. But overall, if you look at South Asia, it is surprising and maybe counterintuitive to many. But Bangladesh, in those social indices, Bangladesh is doing, probably in most indices, Bangladesh is doing better than Pakistan and India. But that doesn't absolve us of the shit we do all the time.
I think what happened in Bangladesh, I think the greatest driver for this change was the fertility rate dropping substantially in Bangladesh. I think that Bangladesh is a small spot. They had reached their carrying capacity, and they just started dropping down in numbers, and I feel like that definitely has helped Bangladesh a lot.
I mean, India is a big country, right? So that's a drawback maybe for them sometimes, because there are lots of huge population to manage, and it's a big country, big land. And with Pakistan, Pakistan has never been stable in terms of politics, in terms of, you know, I mean, the Pakistan have seen military ruling all of its life.
Yeah.
And then after 9/11, now Pakistan was dealing with all this international politics, and then Pakistan was literally being bombed, a part of Pakistan, and was dragged into this fight against. So Pakistan had been struggling because of many reasons.
Many reasons, but mostly associated with just conflict with other countries.
Yeah, conflict, yeah.
We had to deal with the
war.
Bro,
how do you develop a country if there is a suicide bomb attack happening
every couple
months, right? So that was the Pakistan maybe like 5 years ago. I think that situation has improved now, right?
It has improved. But again, I think your audience knows this as well. Those attacks are very isolated in western parts of Pakistan.
Near Afghanistan.
Fortunately for Pakistan, there has been nothing of that sort in 5-6 years in Lahore, Karachi, elsewhere, right? But there is
political situation has become a little more stable than before.
But there is fear that now that Afghanistan has kind of fell apart, that there will be more instability in Pakistan. Imran Khan is beefing up on the security. We'll see what happens. But I think Pakistan really, as a country, has a lot of potential because it has a relatively young population. It has good ties with China, and it has the capacity to have good ties with the West if it wants, because the West looks at Pakistan as a very pivotal area for all their geopolitical strategies. So I think that
Pakistan wants to have good ties with Bangladesh, but Bangladesh government, Bangladeshi people,
So I think that would be a good alliance. I think Pakistan needs to buddy,
especially India being in between.
It's very, to be honest with you,
it could be a strategic relationship.
It's very unsettling to me that these three countries will never get along, because these three countries could form a very strong economic bloc. India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, if they would just put some of their differences aside, and it's very tough.
And it's very tough to put those differences, aside, but I think there could be a strategic relationship. For example, USA have a strategic relationship with many countries
they're not
friends with, or they don't agree with.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia. That's the biggest shame for United States, like supporting a country like that. So
it's funny. I was just watching the news yesterday, and Donald Trump was giving a rally in Florence here in South Carolina, and he was mocking Biden. He was saying Biden is begging, just door to door, going to Middle Eastern countries, give us some oil, give us some oil. He's begging these people, you know, and it's sad. But, you know, Biden has just last year declared that MBS was evil and he was a murderer and this and that. And now he's knocking for oil, right? So it's interesting. The U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia and some of these countries is it's amusing.
I mean, they're begging Iran for oil. Did you know that?
Yeah, they're begging Venezuela for oil. You know, they're begging
all these countries they fuck with.
All the enemies, all the countries.
Quirk of fate.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, you know, just a year ago we were trying to assassinate your president, but
bomb the shit out of your country. But can you forget those days and can you give us some oil?
Yeah, and I honestly, as much as I don't like Saudi Arabia, I understand like why their stance is the way it is now, right? Because their alliance
stance in terms of what?
Well, more recently the oil issue, right? Okay. Saudi Arabia has alliance in OPEC with Russia, right? So everyone's like, well, Russia's not pumping. Saudi Arabia, can you ramp up your production? And Saudi Arabia is like, wait a minute. Number one, ball's in my court, okay? You are my slave.
Yeah, you are my bitch.
Yeah, you are my. Can we say that?
Yes,
you are my bitch.
You are my bitch. Okay.
Okay, and that's one issue now. And the other thing, you know, is giving them now a sense of importance, right? Because for years, oil was.
I mean, that's the leverage.
Oil was dirt cheap for years and years and years, right? I mean, oil was at one point, just a couple years ago, $45 a barrel, right? Now it's like 120, 35, something like that, and potentially going higher. And I think that now Saudi Arabia is like, well, look who came back knocking at my door. Yeah. And I mean,
that's the leverage that Saudi Arabia had over USA since ever.
Yeah.
And they have been getting away with all these things they were doing.
And
now
let's just imagine this. Let's imagine this. If Saudi Arabia just one day decides, fuck US, buy US. We don't want to have any, you know, we'll sell our oil elsewhere. Or you know what? We're going to or we're going to diversify our economy. Yeah. We're not going to depend on oil. Let's just say. And the US is still oil driven. 18% of the oil production, global oil production has already just vanished. Like
I mean, that's what MBS is trying to do now.
Like Russia, most people are not buying from Russia. Then if MBS decides, hey, I'm going to lower my input, my output, then we're screwed, man. The whole world is screwed, right?
I mean, literally, that's what MBA is trying to do, getting their economy away from oil production.
That's why he's making all these economic cities. He's trying to attract investors. I don't think that's going to work. Saudis are done.
That will probably backfire him if USA, you know, if it doesn't serve US's purpose.
Yeah.
You'll see a coup. We know the game. It's been like this forever.
Yeah.
So the HDI, back to the HDI index. You said you will come back to a point there.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I was
talking about India making a point, the HDI index.
Oh, nationalism. We're talking about nationalism, right? So this is like, I know that a lot of people in Bangladesh are very nationalistic. We've talked about this. I've seen tons of people here in South Carolina, students particularly from Bangladesh, who like to display their pride of their country. And I understand you're away from home, but I feel like people like.
You don't need to divorce yourself from the reality,
right?
In the process.
The reality, like. I have never come across anyone who's not proud of where they're from. Yes. Most people are proud of where they're from, yes. But I think that there are varying levels of how prideful someone is.
And how justified that pride is.
And I feel like people from back home, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they have excessive pride.
Yes. And you understand, bro, understand this. They need to latch onto something.
It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism. Excuse me, that's the matter of the fact. It's a coping mechanism. Yes. They need to feel good about something. They don't have anything to feel good about.
Yes.
So we're the best.
Yeah, we're the best.
So although we're the worst.
You artificially inflate your ego, and I think it's okay. But I think that the United States has a lot to be proud of, right? The United States has kind of been like a beacon for the world for quite a while now.
Now, do you know how Desi people will counter that? Oh, you bombed Iraq, you bombed Iran, you bombed Syria. You're the worst people. You're the scum of the planet.
What I'm saying is that the United States did all that because they were playing a chess game too, right? To have world dominance and be ethical, those two things
wow, that's a nice point. So
those things don't happen hand in hand. People look at, for example, what Putin is doing and saying, people are looking at what Putin is doing, right? And they're portraying him as evil and nefarious and this and that. But the reality is that he's playing a strategy.
He's playing by the rules. And he's playing by the book.
If he doesn't play the
strategy... And that book was written by USA.
Yeah, if he doesn't play this strategy, maybe he didn't fine-tune the strategy, but this is how you have to play the game, right? If the United States doesn't play the game like it's playing, the United States can go in a moment, right? China is emerging, India.
So here's the statement by my advisor. I like the statement. Okay, so he was giving an interview with some power, like he was featured. He was being featured on the university website. So he was talking about the nuclear power and how US is leading the nuclear energy research in the world and stuff like that. And he ended his interview by this statement. I remember this statement because it's powerful, it's profound, and it's true. He said, if we don't lead the world, someone else will. So see, so that's the thing. Now, all the bad shit US is doing right now in the world, if US don't do it, someone else will. It's never a vacuum. It's not like if US stops doing these things today, the world would be a better place tomorrow. Right. It's not going to be a better place. China and Russia will come take that place, right? And then, do you want China and Russia to rule the world over USA because you are tired of USA? I would request you to rethink that notion, yeah. But that's not to support what USA does worldwide. But that's the ball game. That's the game everyone plays.
The ideal scenario is that you achieve world domination, and you do it in a fashion where fewer people are harmed, okay? You don't kill the environment, and you do more good than harm, right? That's the ideal. Like that's considered being exemplary, right? You're able to control. People are still able to respect you. The majority of the world doesn't hate your guts. You're not polluting and destroying the planet. I think if you compare US to other countries, comparable countries, I think the US is probably still the best choice. If you want to see everyone as evil, I would say it's the lesser of the evils, right?
So you see, I like, from an idealistic point of view, like choosing or supporting the lesser of two evil. From an idealistic point of view, that's not the right notion. But in reality, you have to make those decisions, right? You have to make those. You have to take the hard pill at some point. So that's why, like, I'm one of the strongest critics of U.S. foreign policy. At the same time, I acknowledge the fact that, like my advisor said, if U.S. doesn't lead the world, someone else will, and that will be probably China or Russia and I don't want that. I don't know about my audience. I don't want to live in that world.
No, I agree.
Things will
get out of control.
Batshit crazy.
But back to nationalism, I think that some countries are too prideful. I think United States, we have reasons to be proud, but I think,
United States have the
this is my message for your audience. This is for myself. This is for you. Like, we all need to just try to improve our own character as people. I mean, nationalism is toxic.
Right.
It's very toxic. It's rooted in religion too, right? If you're a Muslim, the Prophet has said that this is something that you should stay away from, right? So I think that Bengalis, Pakistani, Indians, we could all just kind of like, we need a dose of reality. And the reality is that
that's the dose I gave to my audience.
Yeah, the dose of reality is that we need to work on ourselves, and we need to work on the political affairs and things in our country and try to like tidy up the messes, right? Just like America needs to, but there's so many people in America that are, it's kind of like, it's like me, for example, cheering for a team that I didn't even, cheering for a school that I never went to. Right? Like, what's, that's what you're doing basically when you're supporting a country that you haven't really done anything for, right? You haven't given any money to the country, especially. Well, we'll get to that later, but
coming back to the point of the sense of pride, Americans also have this sense of pride. Oh, we're number one, which is true. That their pride is based on fact, and we have the false sense of pride. We don't have facts on our side. But now here's the thing. It's a funny story. I don't know if I told you this story. So this guy, the imam at the mosque.
Adli.
Yeah, his son. I was talking to. Oh, I think you were there. I think you were there at that.
I was at the.
And he was like, I was saying that U.S. doesn't have the technology to stop a nuclear missile because there no country has this technology, and he wouldn't believe me. He would like, oh no, we're the best. You don't know, we have the technology. I'm like, no, motherfucker, you don't have the technology yet. Nobody has the technology, and he wouldn't believe me because he have this false sense of pride that, oh, we're number one. How come our military is number one? How come we don't have the technology? So those kind of people all over the world, but the difference being like they have real legitimate reason to behave, kind of to believe that way, and we have no reasons to behave or believe that way, and yet we do. So that makes the whole thing ridiculous a little bit.
Yeah, America, we have different issues, right? America is dealing with, we're talking about social issues a lot. You guys are still focusing on
how we're the best in the world.
How you're gonna get your next meal for some people, right? You're still dealing with third issues like diphtheria, cholera.
That's true. That's true. That's bro. There are three categories.
Mosquito vector.
No. Think about this. There are three categories: first world, second world, third world.
Yes.
And we belong to which world?
Third.
Yeah, that's the lowest tier world, right? So that's the fact. Come in terms with the fact.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like our people, you will not be able to make them understand. Like, hey, you are a third world country. Your country is fucked. You are fucked, right? You need to do something about it. They're always full of pride. They're always full of glory. Full of you will not be able to have a conversation with these people. They will not let you start that conversation. They will stop right then and there. Oh, they have hope. They have hope based on what? Like. They all are hopeful.
I can't blame them. The reason I can't blame them is because I know that's how
you made that point already.
That's how humans are.
Yeah, you used a nice term there, like coping mechanism. That's their coping mechanism, right? I mean,
much love for Bangladeshis.
Yeah, much love for my country. I want good for my country. My friend Omer, he also wants good for Pakistan, for Bangladesh, for all those third world countries. And it's
we need to stop being so divisive. We need to realize that we're all on the same page.
Yes, everyone has their own issues. USA is struggling with their own issues. We have our own issues. Maybe we have a sheet pile of issues to work with compared to these first world countries. That's why like people from those countries strive to come to this these first world countries. There is a reason why, right? It's not like because they're just waking up and just deciding to swim across the Mexico River or something like that, or the Amazon forest.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, and people who come here to criticize, if you keep eating out at the same restaurant all the time and you're very critical of it constantly, then don't go there, right? So if you're going to come here and you're going to constantly critique and critique and critique, then at some point maybe you should leave.
So yeah, that's the thing. No, I mean that's the harsh way to say it, but that's the reality. Like that's what I also feel sometimes. I see my folks who come here, and then they start saying like picking the worst parts, and keep talking about it because people back home like those talking points. Now the thing, what they don't realize is these people, they say those things because they want you to feel better, and then at the same time they will never go back, right? At the same time they will never ever go back. So does
or the opposite? You have people that come here,
yeah,
and they show this grandiose living,
yeah,
so they make you feel jealous,
yeah,
because they want
that happens in this age.
They want you to feel shitty because
in this age of social media, that's also true.
That's what I like about your channel. You give a raw analysis.
Yeah,
you never sugarcoat anything.
Nope. It's all real talk. It's all.
You don't show pretty things. You show the ugly, the good, the bad, everything.
Yes, that's what I try to do. So we'll end on that note. Thanks for coming, bro. Thanks for your time. It's always nice talking to you. We always spend good time together, and we'll keep talking, bro.
All right, brother.
All right.